A new Hill-HarrisX poll found voters are split about Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 Supreme Court decision that ruled the U.S. Constitution protects a woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. 7 in 10 want it to remain in some capacity. A plurality, 37%, want it affirmed without any changes, while a third want it changed but kept in place, and 30% want it overturned. Only 17% of voters think abortion should be illegal under all circumstances, with most agreeing it should be legal in at least limited circumstances. Similarly, only 17% think it should be legal under all circumstances. When it comes to what the Supreme Court should do, a third think abortion law should be left to the states, another third think the Supreme Court should reaffirm Roe v. Wade, while a quarter agree with reducing the cutoff date to 15 weeks, and 7% believe that abortion should be extended to 36 weeks. The survey comes after the Supreme Court heard a case that could challenge the landmark decision. On Wednesday, California clinics and their allies in the state legislature unveiled a plan to make the Golden State a sanctuary for those seeking the procedure if Roe is overturned. The plan includes possibly paying for travel, lodging, and procedures for people from other states. So that's a lot to break down. I think it is broadly consistent with where the polling has been in recent years. The country is sort of divided not just on the issue of abortion, but actually on Roe v. Wade itself and what Roe v. Wade means. Both of you, what's your reaction to these numbers and also to the California law?
I'm curious from your perspective as somebody who knows this movement better. Will the next, let's say they succeed in overturning Roe v. Wade, will the next phase be to start criminalizing traveling to California or to another state to have an abortion? Well,
and I think that's what's coming what's coming next in the future of this is battles between state laws. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely possible that if you have states that are creating, because if Roe is overturned, what happens, and we've already seen states doing this, they're essentially creating legislation that would leave abortion legal in the state or protect abortion in all of these different ways, or the opposite if Roe is overturned. And so they're already preparing for this. But what's going to happen is that if you do have states that become sanctuaries, you may actually then see efforts to prevent people from using them as sanctuaries. Kim, what do you think about California, the sort of debate about this in California in particular?
Well, what I think what's really interesting about this entire debate really is how actually in line a lot of people are on both sides of the aisle on this. And this is something that I've been saying for, I'm a very staunch pro-choice person. I'm probably one of the more extreme on this case, in this topic, but I have always recognized that this is not actually a partisan issue, that there are a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals who do not agree with abortion. They feel like it needs to be limited to first term only. There aren't very many people who want to actually eradicate it completely, but there are a lot of Democrats, I would say, that wouldn't mind limiting it down, kind of chipping away at Roe v. Wade right now, which allows it all the way through the first and second term, but to limit it down to that first term. I know they're not really doing it on a term basis, but in general. So, the battle is interesting. And I think, especially when you've got a state like California, you have a lot of Latino voters, and Latinos tend to be very pro-life. But they're also Democrat often. So, it's a really interesting dynamic that's going on with this. As far as the state battle, though, I think that would be really interesting if some states tried to make it illegal for a person to travel to another state in order to obtain an abortion. I don't know how they would get away with that and still call the United States a federation. Yeah. It seems like, then at that point, you just have to be your own country. I mean, can you go to California and smoke pot? I'm pretty sure you can. You're allowed to come here and smoke pot. They're not going to, the home state of Idaho, where I'm from, where it's illegal, is not going to arrest me if I smoke some weed in California and then travel home to Idaho. So how would they do that is really, obviously before with gay marriage, they didn't recognize the marriage if it happened in a different state. But that's different than saying it's illegal for you to have done it.
Yeah, I don't know what that law would look like, but these state battles are going to be, I think they will really heat up, to your point, Ryan.
And they'd try to move it to the federal level too, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
Just straight up ban it.
Absolutely.
This whole leave it to the states isn't really serious, right? That's just what they say now in order to comfort people who are concerned about how radical the movement actually is. Yes. They want to just straight up ban it across the whole country.
Yes.
And if they have control of the White House and Congress, I would expect that they would do that.
Right, it's a little of both in that I think it should actually bring comfort to people who support abortion that throwing it back to the states means that a lot of states will already have very robust protections of abortion in place if that happens. That said, 100%, the pro-life movement will absolutely try to federalize it in the way that, they believe that murder should be banned by the federal government. It'll be the same type of effort. So yeah, and that's sort of where I fall, is that I'm saying to people on the left, listen, like, this may not immediately be as drastic as you think, depending on where you live. At the same time, I think a federal prohibition is warranted in this case. But I think that it is interesting how, like, I'm probably very far on the pro-life side, and Kim and Ryan on the pro-choice side. It's sort of a thin line that separates it. It's just this question of life and when life begins, and a lot of the country we're just sort of very split among reasonable, decent people on the question, and that's how you see these numbers in the sort of splintering that they are. Right?
And I was going to say that the right is kind of underestimating the blowback, but maybe they're not, and maybe they expect the blowback. But in countries that have done this, as you and I talked about recently, in Poland, where they did this, a young woman died in the hospital because her fetus had a terminal complication, but the doctors refused to help her at all, because they're like, well, the law says we can't,
right.
And so they just let her sit there and suffer until she got sepsis and then died. And so there were all these protests in the street about this. And then you had the government backtracking a bit and saying, no, the doctors were at fault. Actually, in this situation, the law would have allowed them to do that. But it's not clear. And as we know about bureaucracies and professionals, if there is some risk involved in doing something, what they're going to do is say, you know what, sorry. Not everybody, but some are going to say, sorry. My hands are tied here. You're just going to have to survive this or not.
Well, what would happen is, right, we would end up putting hospitals, they'd be dealing with attorneys, right? So it would come down to law. And it's like, do you really want to bring the attorney into the
while the infection
medical
is growing, right?
Yeah,
right.
Because that's who you're dealing with. The administration is going to be talking to their attorneys. Well, can we treat this case? Is this going to break the law? Is this, and it's not about bringing even the government or politicians into the treatment room. It's bringing a lawyer in. I mean, that's going to be challenging.
I don't dispute that it's going to be a legal mess, and I actually don't know that the right is underestimating the degree of blowback. I mean, this will be a radical change to the status quo, and I think on the right's perspective, that's welcome news. And so I don't think they're necessarily underestimating the damage, but I do think there's a very good point to be made about all of the particulars of the legal mess that may be imminent if something like this happens.
Also, one other thing that the right has been doing, not to pick on the right too much here.
Bring it on.
But so you've had a couple op-eds lately from people who are saying, okay, well, if they do overturn Roe v. Wade, what the right needs to focus on at that point is supporting the parents and the children who are forced into, the parents who are forced to give birth. We need to start supporting them.
Right.
Start? Come on. All of a sudden now there's going to be alleged concern for parents and for children who are born into poverty. Like, what is preventing those folks from caring today? Like, why do they have to first criminalize abortion and then start to care?
I would question the messaging there, and I really would. I mean, I'd love to take a look at those op-eds because that's really terrible messaging. The pro-life movement is very good about providing diapers and donations and like actual financial and emotional support to women who are pregnant and would prefer to have an abortion or were thinking about having an abortion. So this is like ridiculous messaging from that, because I feel like the pro-life movement has actually been pretty good about that. Mitt Romney's bill for child benefits, monthly child benefits, started during pregnancy. And so, I mean, maybe it's a messaging failure on the right, but I think it's a very fair point.
All right. Well, we will have more Rising right after this.